Arizona Territory, 1878. The moon hung like a silver dollar above the jagged mountains, casting long shadows across the dusty plains of Arroyo Springs. Ethan Holbrook adjusted his worn Stetson and squinted at the crude map in his hands, the corners worn and yellowed from constant handling. The distant promise of gold had brought him here, another nameless patch of frontier where men came with dreams and left with nothing but the dust on their boots. At 25, Ethan had already lived the hard life of a cowboy twice over. His lean frame carried the strength of endless days in the saddle, his skin tanned and weathered despite his youth. His eyes, the clear blue of a mountain stream, betrayed a wariness that went beyond his years. The West had taught him early that attachment was a luxury few could afford. "You aiming to stare at that paper till it bursts into flame?" called a gruff voice. Ethan folded the map and tucked it inside his jacket. "Just making sure we are on the right trail, Samuel." Samuel Porter, a grizzled prospector with a beard like tangled wire, spat a stream of tobacco juice into the dirt. "All trails look the same when you are chasing rumors, boy. Been hunting that vein for 15 years. Ethan dismounted from his chestnut gelding, patting the animal's neck. "This time is different. The man in Tucson had samples. Real gold. And I bet he charged you a pretty penny for that map, too." Samuel dismounted with a grunt, his joints protesting years of hard living. Ethan didn't respond. The truth was, he had spent nearly his last dollar on the map, desperate for a chance at something beyond the endless cattle drives and dangerous work guarding stagecoaches. A man needed something of his own in this vast, unforgiving land. As they made camp, Ethan couldn't help but think about the path that had led him here. Orphaned at 12 when Apache raiders attacked the small ranch where his parents had tried to build a life, he had been raised by a series of trail bosses and wranglers who had little time for sentiment. By 16 he was riding with the men, learning quickly that showing weakness meant being left behind. "The frontier is no place for softness," his first trail boss had told him. "You care about something out here, you just give fate something to take from you." Ethan had taken those words to heart, keeping his relationships as transient as his employment. The closest thing he had to a home was his saddle and the few possessions he could carry on his horse. Men came and went from his life, partners for a season or a job, never anything more. "You know what you're doing once you strike it rich?" Samuel asked as they sat by the fire, beans bubbling in a small pot. Ethan poked at the flames with a stick. "Get some land maybe, something no one can take." "Not thinking of a woman." "Family." Ethan shook his head. "No future in that, not for men like us." Samuel's eyes crinkled at the corners, spoken like someone who's never met the right woman. "Met plenty," Ethan replied. "None worth changing my ways for." But as he rolled into his blanket that night, staring up at the vast canopy of stars, an emptiness yawned inside him that no gold strike could fill. He pushed the feeling away. Tomorrow they would reach Arroyo Springs, and then it would be a matter of finding the landmark described in his map, a rock formation shaped like a buffalo's back, and beginning the real search. Morning broke clear and bright. They packed their meager camp and rode toward the town that had sprung up around a natural spring. Arroyo Springs was like 100 other frontier settlements Ethan had seen, a dusty main street lined with false-fronted buildings, horses hitched to posts, and men who watched newcomers with narrowed, calculating eyes. "First things first," Samuel said as they rode down the main street. "We need supplies and information." The general store was a weathered building with a wide porch. As Ethan tied his horse to the rail, the door swung open, and he found himself frozen in place. She stood framed in the doorway, the sunlight catching in her honey-blonde hair. She wore a simple blue calico dress that had seen better days, but it couldn't hide the graceful way she moved. When she looked up and met his gaze, Ethan felt something shift inside him, a feeling he couldn't name and wouldn't acknowledge. "Excuse me," she said, her voice carrying a hint of the South, soft as spring rain. Ethan realized he was blocking her path and stepped aside hastily, nearly stumbling off the porch. She nodded her thanks, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth as she descended the steps, a basket of supplies balanced on one hip. "Close your mouth, boy, before you start catching flies," Samuel chuckled, pushing past him into the store. Inside, the proprietor was a barrel-chested man with spectacles perched on a bulbous nose. He looked up as they entered, assessing them with the practiced eye of someone who had seen every type of man the frontier could produce. Afternoon, gentlemen, new to Arroyo Springs. Just passing through, Ethan said automatically, a habit born of caution. We need supplies, Samuel interjected, and maybe some local knowledge. The storekeeper straightened. Name's Howard Jenkins, been here since there was nothing but the spring and a few hopeful souls. What sort of knowledge you looking for? Samuel leaned on the counter, heard there might be color in these hills. Jenkins's expression closed slightly. Might be, might not be, a lot of men come through with big dreams. Most leave with empty pockets. That young lady who just left, Ethan found himself asking, is she from around here? Both Samuel and Jenkins looked at him in surprise. Ethan himself was startled by the question. Jenkins's face softened slightly. That would be Delia Josephs. She and her father have a small place just outside town. Decent folks. Her father was injured in a mining accident last year. She takes care of him now. Ethan nodded, trying to appear merely curious rather than inexplicably interested. They purchased supplies, flour, coffee, bacon, and ammunition. As Jenkins wrapped their purchases, he leaned forward slightly. Word of advice, if you are looking for gold, be careful who you trust with that information. We've had trouble lately. Group of men, calling themselves the Scorpion Gang, have been preying on prospectors. They let men do the hard work of finding something, then show up to take it. Samuel nodded grimly. Appreciate the warning. As they loaded their supplies, Ethan spotted Delia again, walking down the street toward a buckboard where an older man sat waiting. Even from this distance, he could see the man's leg was at an unnatural angle, and he leaned heavily on a crutch as Delia helped him from the wagon seat. Don't even think about it, Samuel said, noting the direction of Ethan's gaze. About what? Ethan asked innocently. That girl is settled, folks. You're a drifter with a half-baked dream and an unproven map. Focus on what we came for. Ethan nodded, tearing his eyes away. Samuel was right. They had come to find gold, not entanglements. Yet as they rode out of town toward the hills where their treasure supposedly waited, he found himself looking back, just once, at the small figure in blue who had momentarily distracted him from his purpose. The next few days were filled with hard work, scouting the terrain and comparing it to the crude map. They found the buffalo-shaped rock formation described on the map and began exploring the surrounding area, taking samples from creek beds and examining rock outcroppings. On the third day, Samuel's experienced eye spotted something promising, a quartz vein running through a hillside with tiny flecks that caught the sunlight. This could be it, boy, he said, his voice trembling with excitement as he examined the rock. Need to test it properly, but this looks promising. They worked until sunset, taking samples and marking the location. By unspoken agreement, they decided to return to town rather than camp near their potential find. If Jenkins's warning about the Scorpion Gang was accurate, the less time they spent openly prospecting, the better. The saloon in Arroyo Springs was doing brisk business when they arrived. Ethan and Samuel found a corner table and ordered whiskey and food, speaking in low voices about their discovery. If that vein runs deep, we could be set for life, Samuel said, his eyes gleaming. Need to file a claim first thing tomorrow. Ethan nodded, but his attention was caught by a commotion at the bar. 3 rough-looking men were crowded around a fourth, a younger man with a bloody lip and fear in his eyes. You said the claim would pay out by now, Taylor, one of the men growled, loud enough to carry across the room. We've been patient, but patience has limits. I need more time, the younger man pleaded. The vein is there, I swear it. Just a little deeper than I thought. Maybe you need some motivation to dig faster, another man said, grabbing Taylor's collar. The saloon had gone quiet, the other patrons suddenly interested in their drinks. The barkeep looked nervous but made no move to interfere. Scorpions, Samuel whispered, nodding toward the 3 aggressors. That's Victor Raines in the black vest, mean as a wounded rattler. The others are his brothers, Luke and Wade. Ethan watched as Raines shoved Taylor against the bar. 1 week. After that, we take the claim with or without your cooperation. The Raines brothers departed, leaving Taylor slumped at the bar, looking defeated. The normal buzz of conversation slowly resumed. We need to be careful, Samuel said, if they get wind of our find. Ethan agreed, but he couldn't help noticing how no one had stepped in to help Taylor. That was the way of the frontier, A man's troubles were his own, unless he had something of value to offer in exchange for assistance. They finished their meal and were heading back to their rented room when Ethan spotted a familiar figure emerging from the doctor's office. Delia Josephs was closing the door behind her, her face drawn with worry. Without thinking, he changed direction. "Miss Josephs," he called softly. She looked up, startled, then recognition dawned in her eyes. "You were at the general store the other day." "Ethan Holbrook," he said, removing his hat. "Is everything all right? You look troubled." She hesitated, clearly wondering why this stranger was concerning himself with her affairs. "My father," she finally said. "His leg is infected again. Dr. Wilson says he needs medicine from Tucson." "I'm sorry to hear that," Ethan said, meaning it. "Is there anything I can do?" She studied him, her eyes, a deep amber color he hadn't noticed before, assessing him carefully. "Why would you offer help to someone you don't know, Mr. Holbrook?" It was a fair question, and one Ethan wasn't sure he could answer. "Just seems like the decent thing to do," he said finally. A small smile touched her lips. "That's rare enough in these parts to be remarkable." She adjusted her shawl around her shoulders. "Thank you for the offer, but we'll manage. We always do." She was turning to leave when he spoke again. "How old is your father's injury?" "Just over a year now," she replied. "Mining accident, the timbers gave way in a new shaft." "And you've been caring for him since then?" She nodded. "It's just the two of us. Has been since my mother passed 6 years ago." Ethan realized she couldn't be more than 20, which meant she had been just a girl when she lost her mother. That's a heavy burden for someone so young. Her chin lifted slightly. "We do what we must, Mr. Holbrook. Not everyone has the luxury of drifting from place to place." There was no rancor in her voice, just a statement of fact, but Ethan felt the sting of it nonetheless. "No, I suppose not." "Good evening, Miss Josephs." He watched her walk away, her back straight despite the obvious weight of her responsibilities. Samuel was right, she was settled folks, and he was just passing through. Yet something about her tugged at him in a way he couldn't explain. The next morning, they filed their claim with the local assier, who doubled as the mining registrar. The man raised an eyebrow at their samples but completed the paperwork without comment. "You'll want to start working that claim right away," he advised. "Lot of interest in that area lately." "We plan to," Samuel assured him. They purchased additional supplies, picks, shovels, and pans, along with enough food for several days. As they were loading their horses, Ethan spotted Delia again, this time struggling to load a heavy bag of flour into her buckboard. "I'll catch up with you," he told Samuel, who followed his gaze and sighed. "Don't say I didn't warn you," the older man grumbled, but there was a hint of amusement in his tone. Ethan approached the buckboard. "Allow me, Miss Josephs." Delia looked up, surprise evident on her face. "Mr. Holbrook, we meet again." He lifted the flour sack easily, placing it in the bed of the wagon. "Heading home." She nodded. "Thank you for the assistance." "My pleasure," he hesitated, then added, "We've filed a claim in the hills west of here. If you or your father need any help, our camp is about 3 miles out near the Buffalo Rock." Curiosity flickered in her eyes. "You're prospectors, then?" "For now," he admitted. "Though I've been a cowhand most of my life." "And what will you do if you find your fortune, Mr. Holbrook? Move on to the next adventure?" There was something in her tone that made him pause. Not judgment exactly, but a genuine question about the kind of man he was. "I haven't thought that far ahead," he admitted. "Well, I wish you luck," she said, gathering the reins. "Though I've seen enough men chase gold to know, it often brings more sorrow than joy." "Perhaps this time will be different," he said. She smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her face. "Perhaps. Good day, Mr. Holbrook." As she drove away, Ethan found himself watching until the buckboard disappeared from view. There was something about Delia Josephs that both attracted and unsettled him, a rootedness he had never known, a purpose beyond the next horizon. Samuel was waiting impatiently when Ethan rejoined him. "If you're done making calf eyes at the local girl, we have work to do." They rode to their claim and began the arduous process of testing the vein. By nightfall, they had enough evidence to justify their excitement. The samples they washed showed promising color, not a mother lode perhaps, but certainly enough to make their efforts worthwhile. They established a camp near their claim, but were careful not to leave tools or equipment that might alert others to their discovery. Each night, they returned to town, partly for safety and partly because Ethan found himself hoping for glimpses of Delia. On the third day, as they were working the vein, they heard the approach of horses. Samuel immediately reached for his rifle, but relaxed slightly when he saw it was only two riders, a young man and an older one. "That's Taylor," Samuel muttered. "The fellow from the saloon, don't know the other one." The riders approached cautiously. Taylor raised a hand in greeting. "Afternoon, hope we're not intruding." "That depends on your business," Samuel replied, not unkindly but wary. "Just checking the lay of the land," the older man said. "I'm Jacob Taylor. This is my son, Michael." Michael's face still bore the fading bruise from his encounter with the Raines brothers. "We have a claim about a mile north. Heard there were new folks prospecting." Ethan studied them, seeing no immediate threat. "Ethan Holbrook, this is Samuel Porter." "How's your claim working out?" Samuel asked, careful not to reveal too much about their own find. Jacob's face fell slightly. "Been better. We've found color, but not as much as we hoped, enough to keep the wolves from the door at least." "Those wolves being the Raines brothers?" Ethan asked. Michael's face darkened. "You've heard of them, then?" "Saw them introducing themselves to you the other night," Ethan said. "They've been pressuring small claim holders to sell out or take them on as partners," Jacob explained. "Those who refuse often find themselves facing accidents or theft." "And the law?" Samuel asked. Michael laughed bitterly. "Sheriff Jenkins does his best, but he's one man. The Raines brothers are careful. Nothing happens that can be directly tied to them." "We should form an association," Jacob suggested. "Claim holders looking out for each other. There's a few of us who have managed to hold on to our independence." "Safety in numbers." Samuel looked skeptical, but Ethan found himself considering the idea. "Might be worth discussing," he said. They agreed to meet at the saloon that evening to talk further. As the Taylors rode away, Samuel gave Ethan a hard look. "We came here to find gold, not get tangled in local politics." "What good is gold if we can't keep it?" Ethan countered. "Besides, it's just talk." Samuel grunted, unconvinced. They worked until dusk, then headed back to town. The saloon was less crowded than previous nights, making it easier to spot the Taylors at a corner table. With them were two other men, one middle-aged with a thick mustache, the other younger with spectacles that gave him a scholarly appearance. Jacob made the introductions. "This is Francis Weber, been prospecting these parts for 5 years. And this is Thomas Reed, former schoolteacher turned gold seeker." They exchanged greetings and ordered drinks. The conversation quickly turned to the Raines brothers and their growing influence in the area. "They started small," Weber explained. "Just claim jumping, but now they're more organized. They have men watching new arrivals, identifying promising claims." "They offered to buy me out last month," Reed added. "When I refused, my camp was ransacked while I was in town. Nothing valuable taken, just supplies damaged." "They're becoming bolder," Jacob said grimly. "Word is they're looking to control all mining in this valley. They've already forced out 6 small operations." "What exactly are you proposing?" Samuel asked, still skeptical. "We watch out for each other," Jacob replied. "Take turns guarding claims, share information. Make it harder for them to pick us off one by one." It was a sensible plan, Ethan had to admit, and with their claims showing promise, they would likely draw the Raines brothers' attention sooner or later. "I'm in," he said, ignoring Samuel's sharp look. "We can help with watches." The others nodded appreciatively. They worked out a rough schedule, agreeing to begin the following night. As the meeting broke up, Ethan noticed Delia entering the saloon, an unusual place for a respectable woman. She spotted him and approached, her expression worried. "Mr. Holbrook, I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all, Miss Josephs. Is everything all right?" She twisted her hands nervously. "I was hoping to speak with Dr. Wilson, but he's not at his office. They said he might be here." Jacob Taylor overheard. Doc was called out to the Harmon place. Their boy fell from a horse. "Not expected back until morning." Disappointment and fear flashed across Delia's face. "Thank you, I'll try again tomorrow." "Is someone ill?" Ethan asked, already rising from his chair. "My father," she admitted. "The infection is worse." He has fever now. Without hesitation, Ethan said, "Let me help. I've dealt with infections before." She hesitated, clearly torn between pride and necessity. "I couldn't impose." "It's no imposition," he assured her. "Samuel, can you manage without me tonight?" The older man waved him off. "Go, I'll fill you in tomorrow." Outside, Delia led him to her buckboard. "Our place is about 3 miles east of town," she explained as they climbed aboard. "It's not much, but it's ours." As they drove through the darkening landscape, Ethan learned more about Delia and her father. They had come west from Virginia after the war, her father hoping to rebuild their fortunes lost in the conflict. He had been a moderately successful businessman before the war, but everything had been destroyed when the fighting reached their town. "He tried farming first," Delia explained, "but the soil here is nothing like Virginia. When that failed, he turned to prospecting." "And you," Ethan asked, "what were your dreams?" She smiled sadly. "I was 19 when the accident happened. Before that, I suppose I had the usual young woman's dreams, a home of my own, perhaps a husband, children. Now I just hope to keep what we have." Her fortitude impressed him. Many in her position would be bitter, but she spoke matter-of-factly, accepting the hand life had dealt her. "And you, Mr. Holbrook? What drives a man to wander the frontier chasing gold?" "Ethan, please," he said, "and I suppose I'm looking for something that belongs to me alone, something no one can take away." "And have you found that yet?" He thought about the promising vein in their claim. "Maybe we'll see." Their conversation lapsed into comfortable silence as the buckboard rattled along the rough trail. Finally, they crested a small rise, and Ethan saw a modest cabin nestled against a stand of cottonwoods. A small garden was visible in the moonlight, and a crude barn stood to one side. "It isn't much," Delia said, almost apologetically. "It looks like a home," Ethan replied honestly. Inside the cabin, the air was close and warm from the fire burning in the stone hearth. A man lay on a bed in the corner, his face flushed with fever. He was thin, with gray streaking his once dark hair, and his right leg was visibly misshapen beneath the blanket. "Papa, I've brought help," Delia said, moving quickly to his side. "This is Mr. Holbrook." The man's eyes opened, glassy with fever. "Who?" "Ethan Holbrook, sir," Ethan said, approaching the bed. "Your daughter was concerned about your leg." Mr. Josephs tried to focus on Ethan. "You a doctor?" "No, sir, but I've treated injuries and infections before." "He's burning up," Delia said worriedly. "And the wound looks worse than yesterday." "May I?" Ethan gestured toward the blanket. She nodded, helping to fold it back to expose her father's leg. The injury was ugly, a badly healed break with a wound that had never properly closed. The skin around it was angry red, with lines of infection spreading upward. Ethan had seen similar infections in cowboys gored by cattle or thrown from horses. "We need to clean it thoroughly and draw out the poison. Do you have whiskey?" "And clean cloths." Delia nodded, moving quickly to gather what he needed. Ethan removed his jacket and rolled up his sleeves, washing his hands in the basin she provided. For the next hour he worked carefully, cleaning the wound and applying hot compresses to draw out the infection. Mr. Josephs bore the pain stoically, though sweat beaded on his forehead. "The infection has gone deep," Ethan told Delia quietly. "We've done what we can tonight, but he needs that medicine from Tucson." She nodded, her face drawn with worry. "I was planning to make the journey myself, but I can't leave him like this." "When does the stage run to Tucson?" "Day after tomorrow," she replied. "But the medicine costs $50. I have 30 saved." Ethan didn't hesitate. "I'll cover the rest, and I'll ride to Tucson myself. It's faster than waiting for the stage." Her eyes widened. "Why would you do this for strangers?" He couldn't explain the pull he felt toward her, the desire to ease her burden. Because no one should face these things alone. Tears welled in her eyes, and for a moment he thought she might refuse. Then she nodded. "Thank you, I don't know how I'll repay you." "No repayment necessary," he assured her. "Now let's make your father as comfortable as possible." They worked together to ease Mr. Joseph's fever, applying cool cloths to his forehead and helping him sip water. By midnight his fever had broken slightly, and he fell into a restless sleep. "You should rest," Ethan told Delia. I'll watch him for a while. She looked exhausted but hesitated. You've done so much already. Please get some sleep. I'll wake you if there's any change. Finally, she nodded, retreating to a small cot behind a curtain that divided the cabin. Ethan settled into a chair beside Mr. Joseph's bed, occasionally refreshing the cloth on the man's forehead. In the quiet of the cabin, with only the crackling fire and the soft sound of breathing, Ethan found himself reflecting on his life. For years he had drifted from job to job, place to place, convinced that attachment was a weakness. Yet here he was, involving himself in the troubles of people he barely knew. When he looked at Delia, he saw someone who had faced hardship but remained unbowed. She had roots, purpose, connections. All the things he had told himself were liabilities in the harsh reality of the frontier. But watching her care for her father, tend her garden, and maintain her small home, he wondered if he had been wrong all along. Dawn was breaking when Delia emerged from behind the curtain, her hair loosely braided over one shoulder. She looked younger in the soft morning light, vulnerable in a way that stirred something protective in Ethan. "How is he?" she asked, moving to her father's side. "Fever's down a bit." "He slept through the night." She touched her father's forehead, relief evident in her face. "Thank you for staying." "I'll ride for Tucson today," Ethan said. "I need to stop by our camp first to let Samuel know and get some supplies. Then I'll be on my way." "It's nearly 60 miles, she said. "You'll need to rest your horse, stay overnight." He nodded. "I should be back by tomorrow evening. Will you be all right until then?" "We've managed this long," she said with a small smile. "But yes, we'll be fine. I'll continue with the compresses, keep the wound clean." Ethan rose, gathering his jacket. "I should get going. The sooner I leave, the sooner I'll be back with the medicine." She walked him to the door. In the early morning light, with the dew still glistening on the sparse grass, her small homestead looked peaceful, almost idyllic. "Mr. Holbrook, Ethan," she said, her voice soft. "I don't know why you're doing this for us, but I want you to know how much it means." On impulse, he reached out and took her hand. Her skin was roughened but warm. "Sometimes a person just needs to do the right thing, Delia." Their eyes met and something passed between them, an understanding, a connection that transcended their brief acquaintance. Then she gently withdrew her hand. "Godspeed," she said simply. Ethan mounted his horse and rode away, feeling her gaze on his back long after the cabin disappeared from view. He found Samuel at their camp, already working the claim. "There you are," the older man called. "Was beginning to think you'd run off with that girl." Briefly, Ethan explained the situation and his plan to ride to Tucson. Samuel listened with growing incredulity. "You're risking a 2-day journey for people you barely know," he finally asked. "What about our claim, the association we just joined?" "The claim will still be here when I get back," Ethan replied, gathering his gear. "And you can represent us with the association. I gave my word, Samuel." The older man sighed heavily. "Always knew you had a soft heart under that hard exterior. Just be careful. The road to Tucson can be dangerous. I'll be back tomorrow evening. Keep an eye on things here." With a few more necessities packed, Ethan headed south, pushing his horse as hard as he dared in the growing heat of the day. The journey was uneventful, though he remained vigilant for the dangers that lurked in the Arizona wilderness, hostile natives, bandits, or natural hazards. He reached Tucson as dusk was falling, the small city a welcome sight after the long, dusty ride. After stabling his horse, he sought out the doctor's office, explaining his errand. The medicine, a new antiseptic treatment from back east, was expensive, as Delia had said, but Ethan paid without hesitation. He spent the night in a modest hotel, rising before dawn to begin the return journey. The ride back seemed longer, his mind filled with thoughts of Delia and her father. What would happen after he delivered the medicine? Would he simply return to his claim, to the gold that had brought him to Arroyo Springs? Somehow, the prospect seemed less appealing than it had just days ago. It was early evening when he finally spotted the Josephs' cabin in the distance. Smoke curled from the chimney, and a figure in a blue dress was visible in the garden. As he approached, Delia looked up, shading her eyes against the setting sun. Her face broke into a smile that made the exhaustion of the journey worthwhile. "You're back," she said, coming to meet him as he dismounted. "As promised," he replied, retrieving the package from his saddlebag. "How is your father?" Holding his own, the fever comes and goes, but he's alert more often than not. Inside, Mr. Josephs was sitting up in bed, his face still drawn with pain but his eyes clear. He looked at Ethan with new interest. "So you're the young man who rode all the way to Tucson for an old cripple," he said, his voice weak but steady. "It was no trouble, sir," Ethan replied. Mr. Joseph snorted softly. 120 miles round trip is hardly no trouble. Delia tells me you're a prospector. For now, found a promising claim west of town. Delia took the medicine, carefully reading the instructions before mixing the proper dose. "This should help fight the infection," she explained to her father. "Doctor Wilson said it's the newest treatment." As she tended to her father, Ethan felt suddenly out of place, an intruder in their private world. "I should be going," he said. "Samuel will be wondering where I am." "Nonsense," Delia said firmly. "You've ridden all day, at least stay for supper." Too tired to argue, Ethan accepted. He cared for his horse while Delia prepared a simple meal of beans, cornbread, and coffee. They ate at a small table near Mr. Joseph's bed, including him in their conversation. Ethan found himself sharing stories of his life on the frontier, cattle drives through storms, encounters with wild creatures, the breathtaking beauty of untamed landscapes. Delia listened with rapt attention, and even Mr. Joseph seemed to enjoy the tales. "You've seen more of this country than most men twice your age," Mr. Josephs observed. "Never stayed anywhere long enough to see the seasons change," Ethan admitted. "And what will you do if your claim pays out?" Delia asked, echoing her earlier question. This time, Ethan considered more carefully before answering. "I used to think I'd keep moving, looking for the next opportunity. Now I'm not so sure." Something flickered in her eyes, curiosity, perhaps, or understanding. "What's changed?" "Perspective, maybe," he said, unable to articulate the shift he felt inside himself. "Or just getting older." The conversation drifted to other topics, the growth of Arroyo Springs, the challenges of frontier life, news from back east. It was well past dark when Ethan finally rose to leave. "Thank you for the meal," he said. "And for the company." Delia walked him to the door. Outside, the night was clear and cool, stars scattered like nuggets of silver across the velvet sky. "Will you come again?" she asked, her voice soft in the darkness. "To check on my father's progress, I mean." "If you'd like," he replied, aware of her proximity, the faint scent of lavender that clung to her hair. "I would," she said simply. For a moment they stood in silence, neither willing to end the evening. Then, with a courage born of exhaustion and newfound emotion, Ethan reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. Her skin was soft beneath his calloused fingers. "Good night, Delia," he said. "Good night, Ethan," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. He rode back to town beneath the star-strewn sky, his mind and heart in turmoil. For the first time in years, he was contemplating something beyond the next horizon, the next job, the next strike, and it terrified him. Samuel was waiting at their lodgings, relief evident on his weathered face. "Beginning to think the Apache got you," he grumbled. "Just took longer than expected," Ethan replied, unsaddling his exhausted horse. "How's the girl's father?" "Holding on, the medicine should help." Samuel studied him in the lantern light. "You're getting attached to these people." It wasn't a question, but Ethan answered anyway. "Maybe I am." "Dangerous business that, especially now." "What do you mean?" Samuel's expression turned grim. "While you were playing hero, the Rains brothers paid our claim a visit. Nothing damaged, but they left a clear message. They know we've found something." Ethan's weariness vanished. "What kind of message?" 3 scorpions dead, pinned to a board at the entrance to our shaft." "Did you tell the sheriff?" Samuel laughed humorlessly. "And tell him what? That someone left dead bugs on our property. Besides, we were meeting with Jacob Taylor and the others at the time. Pretty clear they were warning us about that alliance." Ethan felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. What do they want? What everyone wants, gold. And they don't care who they have to step over to get it. They spoke long into the night, weighing options and making plans. The Miners' Association would meet again tomorrow, and they needed to present a united front. In the meantime, they would take turns guarding their claim. Despite his exhaustion, Ethan slept poorly, his dreams a jumbled mess of golden veins, scorpions, and Delia's amber eyes. He woke before dawn, a decision crystallizing in his mind. "I'm going to offer to buy the Joseph's place," he told Samuel over breakfast. The older man choked on his coffee. "You what?" "Not now. When we've proven the claim, extracted enough gold to make it worthwhile. They need the money, and it would give them a fresh start somewhere safer." "And what about you, planning to settle down and play farmer?" Ethan shook his head. "I don't know what I'm planning, just feels like the right thing to do." Samuel wiped his mouth, studying his younger partner. "You're sweet on the girl, admit it." "That's not it," Ethan protested, though the denial rang hollow even to his own ears. "Sure it isn't," Samuel said with a knowing smile. "Just be careful. Getting tangled in local affairs is dangerous enough without adding a woman to the mix." They spent the morning at their claim, confirming that nothing had been damaged beyond the ominous warning. The vein continued to show promise, with each sample revealing more color than the last. Mid-afternoon, Ethan left Samuel working and rode to the Joseph's cabin, telling himself he was merely checking on Mr. Joseph's condition. But the flutter in his stomach as the cabin came into view told a different story. Delia was hanging laundry when he arrived, her hair tied back with a blue ribbon that matched her simple dress. She smiled when she saw him, a genuine expression that transformed her face and sent his heart racing. "You're back," she said, sounding pleased. "Thought I'd check on your father," Ethan replied, dismounting. "See if the medicine is helping." "Come and see for yourself. He's been asking about you." "Inside, mister." Joseph's was sitting in a chair by the fire, his injured leg propped on a stool. His color was better, and though he still looked weak, the improvement was noticeable. "Young Holbrook," he greeted. "Delia said you might come by." "Sir," Ethan nodded, "you're looking better. Thanks to you and that fancy medicine. Delia tells me you covered the cost. I insist on repaying you when I'm back on my feet." "There's no need," Ethan assured him. "I was happy to help." Mr. Josephs gave him a shrewd look. "A man pays his debts, son, one way or another." Their conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. Delia opened it to reveal Jacob Taylor, looking agitated. "Miss Josephs, I apologize for the intrusion," he said, removing his hat. "I'm looking for Ethan Holbrook. His partner said he might be here." Ethan stepped forward. "What's wrong, Jacob?" "Meeting's been moved up." The Raines brothers ransacked Thomas Reed's claim last night, destroyed his equipment, filled in part of his shaft. "We're gathering at my place now." Ethan nodded grimly. "I'll come right away." He turned to Delia and her father. "I need to go. There's been trouble with some local troublemakers." "The Scorpion Gang," Mr. Joseph said, his expression darkening. "They threatened me too before my accident, claimed they had rights to any gold found on my property." Ethan hadn't made the connection before. "You think they caused your accident?" Mr. Joseph shrugged. "No proof, but the timing was suspicious. I'd found a promising vein, refused their offer of partnership. A week later, the shaft collapsed." This new information added urgency to Ethan's departure. "I'll come back tomorrow," he promised Delia. "Be careful," she said, concern evident in her eyes. "Those men are dangerous." The meeting at the Taylor claim was tense, with a dozen miners gathered in the small cabin. Thomas Reed bore a bruised jaw, a souvenir from his encounter with the Raines brothers. "They said next time they'd bury me in the shaft, not just my equipment," he reported grimly. "We need to stand together," Jacob insisted. "Set up a watch rotation, ensure no claim is left unguarded." The discussion was heated, with some arguing for a more aggressive approach. "Why not take the fight to them?" one miner suggested. "They're just 3 men. 3 men with half a dozen hired guns," another corrected. "And they have friends in town, people who look the other way." In the end, they agreed on a system of mutual protection. Claims would be worked in pairs, with no one left alone. Equipment would be secured each night, with rotating guards for the most promising sites. "It's a temporary solution," Jacob acknowledged, "but it buys us time to strengthen our position." As the meeting broke up, Samuel pulled Ethan aside. "This is getting serious. Maybe we should consider cutting our losses, moving on." Ethan shook his head. "And go where? If we run now, we'll just face the same problem at the next strike or the next town." "Someone has to take a stand." Samuel sighed heavily. "Knew you'd say that. Well, can't let you face this alone. I'm in. They returned to their claim, working until dusk, then securing their tools in a hidden cache. The gold they'd extracted so far, a modest amount but promising, was divided between them for safekeeping. That night in town, Ethan found himself unable to sleep. The confrontation with the Rains brothers felt inevitable, a gathering storm that would break over all of them sooner or later. And now his concerns extended beyond himself and Samuel to include Delia and her father. The next morning brought news that further heightened tensions. Sheriff Jenkins had been found beaten behind the saloon, his injuries severe enough that he was confined to bed. Without the law's already limited protection, the miners felt even more vulnerable. "This is their message," Jacob said grimly when they gathered at the general store. "They're telling us they can do whatever they want now." "Then we need to send a message back," Ethan replied, a plan forming in his mind. "Show them we're not intimidated." His proposal was simple but risky, a show of solidarity that would make clear to the Rains brothers that the independent miners were united. They would all work their claims openly, moving in groups large enough to discourage attack. "Safety in numbers," he explained. "They prey on isolated miners. Let's not be isolated." The plan was agreed upon, and the next few days passed in a new routine. Miners traveled between claims in groups, shared meals around common campfires, and established a visible presence throughout the area. The Rains brothers and their men watched from a distance, but made no move against such large gatherings. Ethan continued to visit the Josephs' cabin daily, sometimes helping with repairs or chores, other times simply sharing a meal and conversation. Mr. Joseph's health improved steadily, and with it came a growing rapport between the injured miner and the young drifter. Delia, too, seemed to welcome his visits, her initial reserve giving way to a warmth that both delighted and terrified Ethan. He found himself looking forward to their time together, treasuring the quiet evenings when they would sit on the porch, watching the sunset paint the desert landscape in fiery hues. "Tell me about Virginia," he asked her one such evening as they sat side by side on the rough-hewn bench. She smiled, a hint of nostalgia in her expression. "It was beautiful, green in a way the desert never is. Our home was just outside Richmond, with fields that rolled all the way to a small creek where my brother and I used to play." "You have a brother?" This was the first she'd mentioned any family besides her father. Her smile faded. "Had. William died at Chancellorsville in '63. He was 19. "I'm sorry," Ethan said, understanding now the shadow that sometimes crossed her features. "After that, there was nothing left for us in Virginia. Papa thought the West offered a fresh start, away from the memories and the Reconstruction." "And you, did you want to come west?" She considered the question, her amber eyes reflecting the dying sunlight. "I didn't have strong feelings either way. Mama was already gone, and William, well, I just wanted Papa to find peace. If that meant crossing a continent, so be it." Her selflessness humbled him. While he had spent years drifting, chasing the horizon for his own satisfaction, she had subordinated her dreams to her family's needs. "What about now?" he asked. "What do you want for yourself?" She looked surprised, as if the question had never occurred to her. "I suppose, stability, a life without constant worry. Sometimes I think about teaching. I had some schooling back east, and there are so few educated women out here." "You'd make a fine teacher," he said, meaning it. "What about you, Ethan? What does a wanderer want, besides the next adventure?" The question struck deeper than she could know. What did he want? For years the answer had been simple: freedom, independence, the open road. But now, sitting beside Delia as the desert twilight deepened around them, those answers felt hollow. "I'm not sure anymore," he admitted. "I used to think I knew. And now I'm wondering if I've been running towards something or away from it." She didn't press for clarification, and he was grateful. They sat in companionable silence as the first stars appeared, each lost in their own thoughts yet somehow connected in the shared moment. When it was time for him to leave, she walked him to his horse, their steps slow, reluctant. "Will you come tomorrow?" she asked, her voice soft in the gathering darkness. "Try and stop me," he replied with a smile that she returned, the sight causing a warmth to spread through his chest. On impulse he reached out, taking her hand in his. Her skin was warm, her fingers curling naturally around his own. For a long moment they stood thus connected, neither speaking nor needing to. "Good night, Delia," he finally said, releasing her hand with reluctance. "Good night, Ethan, be safe." The ride back to town seemed shorter than usual, his thoughts full of amber eyes and a gentle smile. It was only as he approached the main street that he noticed something was wrong. A crowd had gathered outside the saloon, voices raised in anger and alarm. Dismounting quickly, Ethan pushed through to find Samuel and Jacob Taylor in heated conversation with several other miners. "What's happened?" he demanded. Samuel turned, relief evident on his face. "There you are, we've had trouble. The Raines brothers made their move." "They hit 3 claims simultaneously," Jacob explained. "Mine, Reed's, and Weber's. Destroyed equipment threatened the men working them. Weber's son was hurt, knife wound to the arm." Cold anger settled in Ethan's chest. "And our claim?" "Untouched so far," Samuel replied, "but they left another message. Said they'd be paying us a social call tomorrow." The implications were clear. The Raines brothers were escalating, testing the miners' resolve. If they succeeded in intimidating Ethan and Samuel, others would soon follow. "We need to be ready for them," Ethan said grimly. "How?" Jacob asked. "There are at least 8 of them now. They've hired more guns." Ethan thought quickly. "We gather everyone who's willing to make a stand. Meet them with our own show of force." The plan was hastily assembled. Word was sent to every independent miner in the area. By morning, they had assembled a force of 15 men, all armed, all determined to protect what was theirs. They rode to Ethan and Samuel's claim before dawn, setting up positions that would allow them to observe any approach. The mood was tense but resolute. These were men accustomed to hardship, to fighting for survival in a harsh land. The sun was well up when they spotted riders approaching, Victor Raines at the head, flanked by his brothers and half a dozen rough-looking men. They drew rein at the edge of the claim, eyeing the assembled miners with surprise and growing anger. "Quite a welcoming committee, Holbrook," Victor called, his voice carrying across the distance. Ethan stepped forward, Samuel and Jacob flanking him. "Heard you were planning a visit. Thought we'd save you the trouble of looking for us." Victor's expression darkened. "This doesn't concern anyone but you and your partner. Tell these others to go home before someone gets hurt." "It concerns all of us," Jacob replied. "You threaten one, you threaten all." For a tense moment, it seemed the confrontation might erupt into violence. The Raines brothers and their men were well armed, but so were the miners. Any fight would result in casualties on both sides. Finally, Victor spat into the dust. "Have it your way for now, but this isn't over, not by a long shot." He wheeled his horse around, his brothers and hired guns following. As they rode away, a collective breath was released among the miners. "They'll be back," Samuel said grimly, "and next time they won't be surprised." "Then we need to be prepared," Ethan replied. "And we need to get the law involved." "Sheriff's still laid up," Jacob reminded him. "Then we send for a marshal. This has gone beyond local trouble." The decision was made to dispatch a rider to the territorial capital, requesting assistance from the federal authorities. In the meantime, they would continue their policy of mutual protection and vigilance. As the others dispersed, Ethan pulled Samuel aside. "I need to warn Delia and her father. If the Raines brothers are escalating, they might remember their old grudge against Mr. Josephs." Samuel nodded. "Go, I'll keep an eye on things here." Ethan rode hard for the Josephs' cabin, anxiety gnawing at him. The isolated homestead would be an easy target for men like the Raines brothers, men who valued neither life nor law when gold was at stake. He found Delia in the garden, her face lighting up at his approach until she saw his expression. "What's wrong?" she asked, setting down her basket of vegetables. Quickly he explained the situation, watching her face grow pale with concern. "You and your father aren't safe here, Delia. Not until this is resolved." "Where would we go?" she asked practically. "Papa can barely travel and this is our home." "Come to town, there's safety in numbers, and we can find lodging." She was shaking her head before he finished. "We can't afford to stay in town and Papa won't accept charity, you know that." Frustration welled within him. This isn't about pride, it's about survival. "I understand the danger, Ethan, but running isn't the answer." "Not for us." Her quiet determination both infuriated and impressed him. She wasn't being stubborn out of pride, but out of a deep-seated belief in standing her ground, a quality he recognized in himself. Then I'll stay here, he decided. At least until the marshal arrives. She looked startled. You can't, your claim. Samuel can watch the claim. I'm more concerned about you and your father. Their debate was interrupted by Mr. Josephs, who had heard enough to understand the situation. The young man is right, Delia. The Rains brothers are dangerous, but so is abandoning everything we've built here. Then we compromise, Ethan suggested. I'll stay tonight, help you prepare defenses. Tomorrow we reassess based on what happens in town. After some discussion, they agreed to his plan. Ethan sent a message to Samuel explaining his decision, then set about helping the Josephs secure their small property. They reinforced doors and shutters, established clear lines of sight around the cabin, and prepared emergency provisions in case they needed to leave quickly. As night fell, Ethan took up position on the porch, rifle across his knees. Delia brought him coffee and sat beside him for a while, the silence between them comfortable despite the tension of their situation. You don't have to do this, she said finally. Risk yourself for us. Yes, I do, he replied simply. She studied his profile in the dim light from the cabin window. Why? It was a question he had been asking himself since the moment he decided to stay. Why was he putting himself between this woman, her father, and danger? The answer came to him with surprising clarity. Because for the first time in my life, something matters more to me than my own freedom. Someone matters more. The words hung in the night air, honest and vulnerable. Delia's breath caught, and for a moment he feared he had said too much, revealed feelings that she couldn't or wouldn't return. Then her hand found his in the darkness, warm and sure. I've been alone so long, she whispered, taking care of Papa, managing our place, never allowing myself to need anyone. Then you rode into our lives, and suddenly. Suddenly what? He prompted when she fell silent. Suddenly I'm terrified, not of the Rains brothers, but of what it would mean to let someone matter, to let myself need someone who might leave when the next horizon calls. Her words pierced his heart, a truth he hadn't fully acknowledged until that moment. His wandering ways, his resistance to attachment, they weren't just about freedom. They were about fear. Fear of loss, of vulnerability, of the pain that comes with loving something or someone you might lose. What if I don't want to leave? He asked, his voice barely audible. What if I've found something worth staying for? She turned to face him fully, her features softened by moonlight and shadow. Have you? In answer, he leaned forward, bridging the small space between them. His lips found hers, gentle at first, then with growing certainty as she responded to his kiss. Her hand came up to rest against his chest, and he could feel the rapid beating of his heart beneath her palm. When they finally parted, he kept her close, forehead resting against hers. I've wandered my whole life, Delia. Never stayed anywhere long enough to put down roots. But with you, I feel like I've found a place worth calling home. Ethan, she whispered, his name a question and an answer all at once. The moment was shattered by the sound of approaching horses, multiple riders moving fast in the darkness. Ethan was on his feet instantly, rifle raised. Get inside, he ordered. Bar the door. Don't open it unless you hear my voice. Delia hesitated, clearly torn between obeying and staying with him. Ethan. Please, he said urgently, I need to know you're safe. She nodded finally, retreating into the cabin. The sound of the bar falling into place was reassuring as Ethan took position at the corner of the porch, using the support post as cover. The riders emerged from the darkness, 3 men moving with purpose. Even in the dim light, Ethan recognized the Rains brothers with Victor in the lead. Holbrook, Victor called, drawing rein at a safe distance. We know you're here, come out where we can see you. You're trespassing on private property, Ethan replied, keeping his rifle trained on the group. Turn around and leave while you still can. Luke Rains laughed, the sound harsh in the night air. Big talk for a man standing alone. What do you want? Ethan demanded, though he already knew the answer. Same thing we've always wanted, Victor replied. Josephs had a claim that showed promise before his unfortunate accident. We're just here to discuss terms. Mr. Josephs isn't interested in your terms. Neither am I. That's not your decision to make, Wade Rains cut in, unless you've suddenly become more than just a visitor to this homestead. The implication was clear, and Ethan felt anger rise within him. My relationship with the Josephs is none of your concern. Now leave before this turns ugly. Victor urged his horse forward slightly. We're reasonable men, Holbrook. All we want is what's ours by right, the gold in these hills. You can be part of that, or you can be in the way. Your choice. I've made my choice, Ethan replied steadily. Now make yours. The standoff stretched, tension building with each passing moment. Ethan knew he was outnumbered, but he also knew that even Victor Rains wouldn't risk a firefight where the first casualty might be himself. Finally, Victor raised a hand in mock surrender. We'll go, for now. But this conversation isn't over, not by a long shot. As they turned their horses, Victor called over his shoulder, Give my regards to Miss Josephs. Tell her we'll be seeing her soon. The threat implicit in his words sent a chill down Ethan's spine. He maintained his position until the sound of hoofbeats faded into the distance, then quickly checked the perimeter to ensure they had truly departed. Only then did he return to the cabin, knocking softly. Delia, it's me. They're gone. The door opened to reveal Delia and her father, both armed, she with a shotgun, he with an old revolver despite his seated position. What did they want? Mr. Josephs demanded. What they always want, Ethan replied grimly. Your gold, and to intimidate anyone who stands against them. Did it work? Delia asked, setting aside her weapon. Ethan met her gaze, seeing the same determination he felt. No, but they'll be back, and next time they won't come just to talk. The rest of the night passed uneventfully, though none of them slept much. At first light, Ethan rode into town to check on Samuel and the others, promising to return by midday. He found Arroyo Springs in turmoil. During the night, the Rains brothers had struck again, this time burning Thomas Reed's cabin to the ground. Reed himself had escaped with minor injuries, but the message was clear. The conflict was escalating. They're picking us off one by one, Jacob said grimly as they gathered at the general store. Testing our resolve. And our rider hasn't returned from the capital yet, Samuel added. Could be days before we see a marshal. Ethan shared news of his own confrontation with the Rains brothers, confirming what they already knew. No one was safe as long as the gang operated freely. We need to take the offensive, someone suggested. Strike at them before they hit someone else. And become no better than them, Ethan countered. No, we defend what's ours, but we do it within the law. What law? Thomas Reed demanded, his face still smudged with soot from his burned home. Sheriffs laid up, no marshal in sight. Meanwhile, my life's work is ashes. The debate raged, with tempers flaring on all sides. In the end, they agreed to a compromise. They would establish a town watch, patrolling in groups to discourage further attacks, while continuing to wait for official assistance. Ethan pulled Samuel aside as the meeting broke up. I need to get back to the Josephs. The Rains brothers specifically threatened them. Samuel nodded. Go, we've got enough men to cover the claims for now. What about our gold? Is it secure? Hidden it in 3 different places, Samuel assured him. Even if they ransack the claim, they won't find everything. Reassured, Ethan gathered additional supplies, ammunition, food, medical necessities, and headed back to the Josephs' homestead. The ride gave him time to think, to process the emotions and revelations of the previous night. He had kissed Delia, confessed feelings he had barely acknowledged to himself, and she had responded in kind. What did that mean for his future? For years he had defined himself by his freedom, his ability to move on whenever the mood struck. Now he was contemplating something entirely different, putting down roots, making commitments, building a life with someone else to consider. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. He arrived at the cabin to find Delia in the garden, seemingly unconcerned despite the dangers that threatened. She looked up at his approach, her face lighting with a smile that made his heart skip. You're back, she said simply, as if his return was both expected and welcome. As promised, he replied, dismounting. How's your father? Resting, the excitement last night took a toll on him. Ethan quickly shared the news from town, watching her face grow serious as she absorbed the implications. We need to be prepared for anything, he concluded. The Rains brothers are growing more desperate. She nodded, her practical nature asserting itself. We have supplies for a week, ammunition for the shotgun and Papa's revolver. If necessary, we can use the root cellar as a hiding place. It has a concealed entrance. Her calm courage impressed him anew. This was a woman who had faced hardship and emerged stronger, not bitter. A woman who understood that survival on the frontier required both strength and adaptability. "Delia, about last night," he began, needing to address what had passed between them. "I meant what I said," she interrupted, her amber eyes meeting his directly. "And what I did, but I understand if you have reservations. This life, my life, is complicated. I come with responsibilities that most men would find burdensome." "I don't see them as burdens," he said honestly. "I see a woman who loves her father, who has built a home against all odds, who faces each day with courage and grace. How could I not admire that? How could I not admire you?" A blush stained her cheeks, but she didn't look away. "And your wandering heart, what of that?" It was a fair question, one he had asked himself repeatedly on the ride from town. "I've spent years running, Delia, from attachments, from responsibilities, from the pain of caring too much. I told myself it was about freedom, but the truth is simpler. I was afraid." "Of what?" "Of exactly this. Of finding someone who matters so much that losing them would destroy me." She stepped closer, her hand reaching out to touch his face, tracing the line of his jaw with gentle fingers. "I can't promise we won't lose each other, Ethan. Life offers no such guarantees, especially out here. But I can promise that what we build together would be worth the risk." Her words resonated deep within him, challenging the belief that had guided his life for so long, that attachment was weakness, that caring made you vulnerable. Perhaps vulnerability wasn't something to be feared but embraced, a necessary part of truly living rather than merely surviving. "I want to try," he said simply, "to build something with you." Her smile was like sunrise after the longest night. "Then we'll try together." The moment was broken by the sound of approaching horses, not the stealthy approach of the previous night, but the open arrival of familiar voices. Ethan turned to see Samuel and Jacob Taylor riding toward the cabin, their expressions urgent. "What is it?" he called, moving to meet them, Delia at his side. "Trouble," Samuel replied grimly, dismounting. "Big trouble. The Rains brothers have taken over the town." "What?" Ethan and Delia spoke in unison. Jacob nodded, his face grim. "They rode in an hour ago with at least a dozen men, armed to the teeth. They're holding several miners at the saloon, including Weber and Reed, saying they'll release them when the rest of us agree to sell our claims." Cold anger settled in Ethan's chest, and the townspeople. "They're just allowing this." "Most are staying out of it," Samuel replied. "Can't blame them, they've got families to protect." "What about Sheriff Jenkins?" "Still confined to bed. And they've posted guards at his house to ensure he stays there." Ethan processed this information, mind racing. "How many of our men are still free?" "About 8, Jacob replied. "The rest are either held in the saloon or unaccounted for." "And you came here because—" "Because we're organizing," Samuel cut in. "Gathering everyone who's willing to make a stand. The Rains brothers have gone too far this time. Even if we wanted to sell our claims, there's no guarantee they'd honor any agreement." "They wouldn't," Delia interjected, her face pale but determined. "Men like that only understand force." Ethan looked at her, concerned. "You and your father should leave, head for the next settlement, we'll handle this." She shook her head firmly. "This is our home, Ethan. We've fought too hard for it to run now." "She's right, mister," Joseph said from the doorway, leaning heavily on his crutch. "Rains drove me from one claim already. I won't let him drive us from our home." Ethan wanted to argue, to insist they seek safety, but he recognized the same determination in their faces that he felt in his own heart. These were not people who ran from trouble. They faced it together. "All right," he conceded, "but you stay here where it's defensible. We'll deal with the Rains brothers." They quickly formulated a plan. Jacob would continue gathering the remaining free miners, while Samuel and Ethan returned to town to assess the situation firsthand. They would meet at a designated location outside town at nightfall to finalize their strategy. Before departing, Ethan pulled Delia aside. "If we're not back by morning, or if you hear fighting in town, take your father and head east. Don't stop until you reach the next settlement." "I should be with you," she protested. "I can shoot as well as any man." "I know you can," he said, taking her hands in his, "but your father needs you. And I need to know you're safe." She looked as if she might argue further, then relented. "Be careful, those men have nothing to lose now." "Neither do I," he replied, "not anymore." On impulse, he pulled her close, kissing her with all the emotion he couldn't put into words. Fear, hope, determination, and something deeper that he was only beginning to recognize as love. When they parted, her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "Come back to me, Ethan Holbrook, that's an order." He smiled, touching her cheek gently. "Yes, ma'am." The ride back to Arroyo Springs was tense, each man lost in his own thoughts. For Ethan, the stakes had changed dramatically in the space of a few days. What had begun as another prospecting venture, another temporary stop in his wandering life, had become something far more significant. Now he was fighting not just for gold or pride, but for a future that for the first time included someone else. They approached town cautiously, leaving their horses hidden and proceeding on foot. The main street was eerily quiet, with only a few nervous townspeople hurrying about their business under the watchful eyes of armed men posted at strategic locations. The saloon appeared to be the Raines brothers' headquarters, with several rough-looking men standing guard outside. Through the windows, Ethan could see movement inside, the hostages, presumably, along with their captors. "We need to know exactly how many men they have and where they're positioned," Samuel whispered as they observed from the shadows of an alleyway. "And how many hostages," Ethan added. "We can't risk a frontal assault with innocent people in the crossfire." They separated, each taking a different route to circle the town, noting the positions of guards and any potential weaknesses in the Raines brothers' occupation. When they rendezvoused again at the edge of town, they had a clearer picture of the situation. "I count 15 men, including the Raines brothers," Samuel reported. "Most are concentrated around the saloon, but they've got lookouts on the rooftops and at each end of the main street." "And at least 6 hostages in the saloon," Ethan added. "Plus they're watching the sheriff's house and the telegraph office." "They're thorough, I'll give them that," Samuel grudgingly admitted. They retreated to the meeting point outside town, where Jacob had gathered 7 other miners willing to fight. The group was a mixed lot, some young, some seasoned, all determined to reclaim their town and their claims. "We're outnumbered," Ethan stated bluntly as they huddled around a small, concealed fire, "and they have hostages. A direct confrontation would be suicide." "Then what do you suggest?" one of the younger miners asked, frustration evident in his voice. "We can't just leave our friends in there." "We don't," Ethan assured him. "But we need to be smarter than them. Divide their forces, free the hostages, then deal with the Raines brothers directly." He outlined a plan that, while risky, offered their best chance of success. They would split into 3 groups, one to create a diversion at the edge of town, drawing away some of the guards, another to approach from behind the saloon where security was thinnest, and a third, led by Ethan, to enter the saloon itself once the way was clear and confront the Raines brothers directly. "We move at dawn," Ethan concluded, "when they're tired from a night of watchfulness." The others nodded in agreement, each man aware of the dangers but committed to the cause. They dispersed to prepare, leaving Ethan and Samuel alone by the dying fire. "Risky plan," Samuel observed, poking at the embers with a stick. "Got a better one?" "Nope. Just making an observation." They sat in companionable silence for a while, each lost in thought. Finally, Samuel spoke again, his voice gruff with an emotion he rarely displayed. "You're different, you know. Since meeting that girl." Ethan didn't deny it. "She changes things. For the better, I'd say. Never seen you care about something like this before. Something bigger than your next meal or your next dollar." "Does that disappoint you?" Ethan asked, genuinely curious. Samuel laughed softly. "Hell no. Been waiting years for you to grow up, find something worth fighting for. Just didn't expect it to happen quite so suddenly or in the middle of a gold claim dispute." Ethan smiled despite the gravity of their situation. "Life's full of surprises." "That it is," Samuel agreed. "Now get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." Dawn broke clear and cold, the desert air sharp with the promise of heat to come. Ethan and his companions moved into position, each group knowing its role in the plan. Tension was high, but determination higher. These men had everything to lose if they failed. The diversion was simple but effective. A small fire set in an abandoned shack at the edge of town. far enough from other buildings to prevent a general conflagration, but visible enough to demand attention. As predicted, several of the Rain's gang's lookouts moved to investigate, creating the opening Ethan's team needed. They approached the saloon from behind, using the early morning shadows for cover. The rear entrance was guarded by a single man, easily subdued by Samuel's silent approach and quick hands. Inside, they could hear voices, Victor Rains giving orders, the murmur of captives, the shuffling of restless men. Ethan took a deep breath, checking his revolver one last time. "Remember," he whispered to his companions, "the hostages are the priority, get them clear first." With a nod to Samuel, he pushed open the door and stepped into the saloon, gun raised. "Morning, gentlemen, hope we're not interrupting." The scene froze, Victor Rains at the bar, his brothers nearby. The hostages huddled at tables under the watchful eyes of several gunmen. For a heartbeat no one moved, surprise evident on every face. Then chaos erupted. Ethan fired first, his bullet striking the wall behind Victor's head, a warning shot deliberately placed. Behind him, Samuel and the others fanned out, targeting the armed men guarding the hostages. "Get down!" Ethan shouted to the captives, who needed no second urging. They dove beneath tables as gunfire erupted throughout the saloon. The fighting was intense but brief. The Rains gang, caught off guard and divided by the diversion, found themselves outmaneuvered. Several surrendered immediately, while others attempted to return fire, only to be cut down by the determined miners. In the confusion, Wade Rains managed to grab Thomas Reed, using him as a shield. "Drop your weapons or he dies," he shouted, pressing his revolver to Reed's temple. The room stilled, a tableau of violence frozen in mid-action. Ethan kept his gun trained on Victor, who had taken cover behind the bar. "It's over, Wade," Ethan said calmly. "Your men outside are already being rounded up. Let him go." "Like hell," Wade snarled. "I want safe passage out of town. Me and my brothers, or this man's brains decorate the wall." The standoff stretched, tension building. Ethan could see the fear in Reed's eyes, the desperation in Wade's. A wrong move now would end in tragedy. "Put down your gun, Wade," came a new voice from the doorway. Sheriff Jenkins stood there, pale and unsteady but upright, his rifle trained on Wade Rains. "I won't ask twice." Wade's eyes darted between Ethan and the sheriff, calculating his chances. In that moment of distraction, Reed acted, driving his elbow hard into Wade's stomach. As Wade doubled over, Reed twisted away, giving Ethan a clear shot. He didn't take it. Instead, he closed the distance in 2 quick strides and struck Wade with the butt of his revolver, sending him crashing to the floor, unconscious. "Anybody else want to try something stupid?" Ethan asked, scanning the room. Victor Rains slowly raised his hands, his expression one of calculated submission. "Seems you've won this round, Holbrook." "Not a round, Rains, the whole game." The cleanup took hours. The surviving members of the Rains gang were secured in the town's small jail, with volunteers supplementing the still recovering sheriff's authority. Those who had been wounded on both sides were treated by the local doctor. By midday, a semblance of normalcy had returned to Arroyo Springs, though an undercurrent of tension remained. The miners gathered at the general store, celebrating their victory and mourning their losses. One of Jacob's men had been killed in the firefight, and several others wounded. "What happens now?" Thomas Reed asked, nursing a drink despite the early hour. "The jail can't hold them all, and the nearest circuit judge is weeks away." "We escort them to the territorial capital," Sheriff Jenkins replied. "The marshal there can hold them until trial." Ethan, who had been surprisingly quiet during the celebrations, stood. "I need to check on the Josephs," he announced. "Make sure they're all right." Samuel gave him a knowing look. "Go, we've got things under control here." The ride to the Josephs' homestead seemed longer than ever, anxiety spurring Ethan to push his horse harder than was wise in the growing heat of the day. As the cabin came into view, relief washed over him. Everything appeared normal, with smoke rising from the chimney and chickens scratching in the yard. Delia emerged from the house as he approached, her face lighting up at the sight of him. "Ethan, we heard gunfire from town. Is everything all right?" He dismounted, suddenly aware of how tired he was, how the events of the morning had drained him. "It's over," he said simply. "The Rains brothers are in custody, their gang scattered or captured." "Thank God," she breathed, moving to his side. "You're hurt," she added, noticing the bloodstain on his sleeve. just a graze. Barely felt it. She led him into the cabin, where Mr. Josephs greeted him with evident relief. "Holbrook, good to see you in one piece. What happened?" As Delia cleaned his wound, indeed, just a graze, though it stung when she applied antiseptic, Ethan recounted the events of the morning. Both Josephs listened intently, their expressions shifting between concern, relief, and outrage as the tale unfolded. "So it's truly over?" Mr. Josephs asked when he had finished. "They'll face justice." "They will," Ethan confirmed. "Sheriff Jenkins is organizing an escort to take them to the territorial capital. They'll stand trial for multiple crimes: assault, kidnapping, destruction of property, and murder in the case of Victor Raines." "And your claim?" Delia asked as she bandaged his arm. "It's secure now." "It is. Samuel and I can work it properly, without looking over our shoulders." "That's what you came here for," she said softly, a question in her voice that she didn't quite ask. Ethan caught her hand, holding it gently. "It's what brought me here," he agreed. "But not what's keeping me here." Her eyes met his, hope and uncertainty mingled in their amber depths. "And what is keeping you here, Ethan Holbrook?" "You," he said simply. "You and the future I can see with you, if you'll have me." "Mr." Josephs cleared his throat pointedly. "Think I'll check on those chickens," he muttered, reaching for his crutch and making his way outside with surprising speed for a man with his injury. Alone with Delia, Ethan found himself suddenly nervous, the words he wanted to say catching in his throat. He had faced down armed men that very morning with less trepidation than he felt now. "I know it's sudden," he began, still holding her hand. "We've known each other such a short time, but I've never felt this way before, like I've found something I didn't even know I was looking for." "And what is that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Home," he replied. "Not a place, but a feeling. When I'm with you, I feel like I've finally found where I belong." Tears shimmered in her eyes, but her smile was radiant. "I feel the same," she admitted. As if all the hardship, all the struggle was leading to this moment. To you. He drew her closer, his free hand cradling her face. "I love you, Delia Josephs. I want to build a life with you, right here if that's what you want, or anywhere else if it's not." "I love you too," she replied, the words a soft benediction. "And I don't care where we are, as long as we're together." Their kiss was a promise, a beginning, a declaration more binding than any formal vow. When they finally parted, both were smiling despite the tears that threatened. "What about your gold?" she asked, a teasing note in her voice. "Your fortune waiting to be claimed." "Gold brought me to Arroyo Springs," he said, "but I found a treasure far more valuable than anything in the ground. I found my heart's home in your eyes, Delia, and that's worth more than all the gold in Arizona." In the weeks that followed, Arroyo Springs slowly returned to normal. The Raines brothers and the surviving members of their gang were transported to the territorial capital to await trial. With the threat removed, the independent miners resumed work on their claims, many of which proved productive if not spectacularly rich. Ethan and Samuel continued to work their claim, extracting enough gold to justify their initial optimism. But Ethan's priorities had shifted. Where once he had seen gold as his ticket to independence, he now viewed it as a means to a different end, a foundation for the future he hoped to build with Delia. Each evening he would ride to the Josephs' homestead, sometimes staying for dinner, other times simply sitting with Delia on the porch, watching the sunset paint the desert in fiery hues. They talked of the future, of possibilities, of dreams long deferred but now within reach. Mr. Joseph's health improved steadily, the infection finally clearing with proper treatment. Though he would never regain full use of his injured leg, he became more mobile, able to contribute to the running of the homestead in ways that restored his dignity and purpose. One evening, as they sat around the small table after dinner, Mr. Josephs cleared his throat purposefully. "Been thinking," he announced, "about the future." Ethan and Delia exchanged glances, uncertain what was coming. "This place, Mr." Josephs continued, gesturing to encompass the cabin and the land around it. "It's enough for me, more than enough, but for a young couple looking to start a life together." He let the sentence trail off significantly. Delia colored slightly. "Papa, what are you saying?" "I'm saying that if a certain young man were to ask a certain question of my daughter, I wouldn't stand in the way. In fact, I'd give my blessing. Provided he had plans for supporting her properly, of course." Ethan sat straighter, meeting the older man's gaze directly. Sir, if you're saying what I think you're saying, I do have such plans. Our claim is producing well, and I've been saving every penny. I want to buy the adjoining land, expand this homestead. Build a proper house where we all could live comfortably. Mr. Josephs nodded approvingly. Thought you might say something like that, and I think it's a fine idea. This land is good land. With proper investment, it could support a family quite well. Delia looked between the two men, her expression a mixture of amusement and exasperation. Are you two discussing my future without consulting me? Of course not, sweetheart, her father replied with a wink at Ethan. Just clearing the path, so to speak. The walking itself is up to you two. That night, as Ethan prepared to leave, Delia walked him to his horse as usual. The moon was full, bathing the landscape in silver light that transformed the harsh desert into something ethereal and beautiful. Your father wasn't very subtle, Ethan observed, taking her hands in his. She laughed softly. Subtlety has never been his strong suit, but his heart is in the right place. And what about your heart? Ethan asked, suddenly serious. Where does it lie? Her answer was in her eyes before she spoke. With you, wherever you are, that's where my heart is. Even if where I am is right here, no more wandering, no more horizons to chase. Especially then, she replied. But Ethan, I would never ask you to change who you are, if the open road still calls to you. He silenced her with a gentle finger to her lips. The only call I hear now is yours. My wandering days are over, Delia. I've found where I belong. From his pocket he withdrew a small object, a ring, simple but elegant, a gold band set with a small, perfect diamond. I've been carrying this for a week, waiting for the right moment. Her breath caught as he dropped to one knee, still holding her hand. Delia Josephs, you've shown me what really matters in this world. Not gold or freedom or the next horizon, but love and home and belonging. Will you marry me, make a life with me here or wherever our dreams take us? Tears spilled down her cheeks, silver in the moonlight. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Ethan Holbrook, I will marry you. The ring slid onto her finger as if made for her. When he rose and took her in his arms, their kiss sealed a promise that both knew would last a lifetime. Fall turned to winter, a mild season in the Arizona territory, but still requiring preparation and care. Ethan divided his time between working the claim with Samuel and improving the Josephs' homestead, which would soon be his home as well. With some of the gold from their claim, he purchased the adjoining land, doubling the size of the property. He hired local men to help build a new house, larger and more comfortable than the original cabin, with a proper bedroom for Mr. Joseph's and a spacious kitchen where Delia could work without cramping. Their wedding was set for spring, when the desert would bloom briefly, transforming the harsh landscape with patches of vibrant color. The entire town of Arroyo Springs was invited, the community having embraced the romance that had blossomed in their midst. Samuel, despite his initial skepticism, proved to be Ethan's strongest supporter. Always knew you'd settle down eventually, he would say with a wink. Just needed the right woman to lasso that wandering spirit of yours. As for Delia, she blossomed with happiness. The constant worry that had lined her young face gradually faded, replaced by a quiet joy that transformed her beauty from merely physical to something that seemed to illuminate her from within. They were married on a perfect April day, with wildflowers dotting the landscape and a gentle breeze tempering the desert heat. The ceremony took place at their new home, with Sheriff Jenkins officiating and Mr. Josephs proudly giving away his daughter. Delia wore a gown of ivory silk, ordered from back east months in advance, Ethan's wedding gift to her. With her honey-blonde hair arranged in soft curls and a crown of desert blooms, she was a vision that took his breath away as she walked toward him on her father's arm. Their vows were simple but heartfelt, promises to love and cherish, to support and protect, to build a life together founded on respect and devotion. When Ethan slipped the gold band onto her finger to join her engagement ring, his hands were steady but his eyes shimmered with emotion. I now pronounce you husband and wife, Sheriff Jenkins declared, a broad smile creasing his weathered face. What God has joined together, let no man put asunder. The celebration that followed lasted well into the night, with dancing and feasting, music and laughter. Ethan, who had spent his life avoiding attachments, found himself surrounded by people who had become friends, even family, in the space of a few short months. As the evening waned, he and Delia slipped away from the festivities, walking hand in hand to the small rise behind their new home. From this vantage point, they could see the lights of Arroyo Springs in the distance, the silver ribbon of the creek that gave the town its name, and the vast expanse of desert stretching to the horizon. "Happy?" he asked, his arm around her waist, her head resting against his shoulder. "More than I ever thought possible," she replied softly. "And you, any regrets about giving up your wandering ways?" He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "How could I regret finding the very thing I've been searching for all along? You've given me a home, Delia, not just a place but a belonging, a purpose. And you've given me hope," she said, "a future beyond mere survival. Dreams I'd almost forgotten how to dream." They sealed these declarations with a kiss, tender and sweet, a promise of all the days and nights to come. Above them, stars scattered across the vast Arizona sky, witnessing the moment when two paths, once separate and uncertain, joined to form a single journey forward. Epilogue 5 years later. The setting sun cast long shadows across the yard of the Holbrook ranch as Ethan rode in from checking the western pasture. The property had grown substantially over the years, expanding from the original homestead to include several hundred acres of decent grazing land and the still productive gold claim that had started it all. As he approached the house, a comfortable two-story structure that had replaced the original cabin, the front door burst open, and a small figure darted out, golden hair flying behind her. "Papa." "Papa," 4-year-old Emma cried, racing toward him with the abandon only a child can muster. "You're home." Ethan dismounted quickly, sweeping his daughter into his arms and spinning her around, her delighted giggles the sweetest music he'd ever heard. "And how's my princess today? Have you been helping your mama?" "I helped make pie," she announced proudly. "Apple pie for after supper." "Then I'd better wash up quickly," he replied, setting her down but keeping hold of her small hand. "Wouldn't want to miss that." Inside, the house was warm and welcoming, filled with the mouth-watering aroma of cooking and the comfortable clutter of a well-lived-in home. Delia stood at the stove, her back to the door, a toddler balanced on her hip as she stirred something in a large pot. "Look who's here, Mama," Emma announced unnecessarily. Delia turned, her face lighting with the smile that, even after 5 years of marriage, still made Ethan's heart skip a beat. "Welcome home, husband," she said, accepting his kiss as he crossed to her. "Productive day." "Very," he confirmed, taking 2-year-old William from her arms. The boy, named for Delia's fallen brother, patted his father's face with pudgy hands. "The new fence is holding well, and the cattle look healthy. Samuel sends his regards. He'll be by for dinner tomorrow." Samuel had remained Ethan's partner in the mining venture, though both men now divided their time between the claim and other pursuits. Ethan with his growing ranch, Samuel with the general store he had purchased in town when the previous owner retired. "And Papa?" Delia asked, referring to her father, who now lived in a comfortable cottage on the property, his health much improved, though he would always walk with a pronounced limp. "Already home. Stopped by the cottage on my way in. He's just resting before dinner." Their family had expanded in other ways as well. After the Raines brothers' trial and conviction, several of the miners had decided to settle permanently in the area, including Jacob Taylor and his son. The younger Taylor had taken a shine to Delia's friend, Martha Wilson, the daughter of the local doctor. Their wedding the previous year had been a joyous occasion, cementing the bonds of community that had formed in the aftermath of the conflict. As they sat down to dinner that evening, Ethan, Delia, their 2 children, and Mr. Joseph's, Ethan found himself marveling at the turns his life had taken. From solitary drifter to husband, father, and respected rancher, all in the space of a few years. "What are you thinking about?" Delia asked softly as they cleared the table after the meal, the children playing under Mr. Joseph's watchful eye. "How lucky I am," Ethan replied honestly. "How different my life would have been if I hadn't followed that map to Arroyo Springs." She smiled, her amber eyes as captivating as the day they first met. "I think some things are meant to be, no matter what path we take to reach them. You think we would have found each other even if I'd gone to California instead?" "Or Texas." "I do," she said with certainty. "Some souls are meant to find each other." He pulled her close, breathing in the lavender scent of her hair. Then I'm grateful fate didn't make us wait any longer than it did. Later, after the children were asleep and Mr. Josephs had retired to his cottage, they sat on the porch as they often did, watching the stars emerge in the deepening blue of the desert sky. Delia's head rested on Ethan's shoulder, his arm around her waist, the silence between them comfortable and content. "I have news," she said finally, her voice soft in the gathering darkness. "Oh," he prompted, curious at the hint of something special in her tone. She took his hand, guiding it to rest against her abdomen. "We'll be welcoming another little Holbrook come winter." Joy surged through him, pure and unalloyed. "Truly." "You're certain?" "Dr. Wilson confirmed it yesterday," she replied, smiling up at him. "I wanted to be sure before I told you." He pulled her closer, overcome with emotion. "I love you, Delia Holbrook. More each day, if that's even possible." "And I love you," she replied, her voice steady with the certainty of a promise kept, a journey shared, a future secured. "My wandering cowboy who found his heart's true home." As they sat together beneath the star-strewn Arizona sky, Ethan reflected on the irony of his life's journey. He had come to this harsh, beautiful land searching for gold, for the elusive promise of wealth that might finally give his restless spirit peace. Instead, he had found something far more valuable, a love that had transformed him, a family that had rooted him, and a home that had finally given his wandering heart a place to rest. In Delia's amber eyes, he had discovered the real treasure, not cold metal from the ground, but the warmth of belonging, the richness of love freely given and joyfully returned. It was a fortune beyond price, one that would never diminish with time, but only grow more valuable with each passing day. The frontier had taught him many harsh lessons over the years, but its greatest gift had been this: that sometimes, in the most unexpected places and the most unlikely moments, a man searching for gold might find his heart's true treasure instead.